We are fortunate to have with us 8 outstanding scholars who have conducted research on various aspects of Cherokee history in the 19th century. They will share their findings with us, and in turn, their research will inform the Cherokee exhibition that will open at the Gilcrease Museum in 2017. The story of the emergence of the Cherokee Nation in Indian Territory is a story of triumph over tragedy, a story of resilience in the face of adversity. It's a story we want to share with the public. Partnering with the Cherokee Nation, the Gilcrease Museum is well equipped to help tell this story, not only with the art and artifacts in the collection, but also with a massive collection of archival documents. The planned exhibition encompasses the entire tenure of John Ross as principal chief. Gilcrease Museum has 11 lineal feet of John Ross papers that contain his public and private correspondence and various other records of the Cherokee Nation. John Ross served as principal chief for 38 years, from 1828 until his death in 1866, longer than anyone else in history. He also led the nation during some of its most turbulent periods. During his tenure, the politics of removal from the original homeland, the arduous journey resulting in tremendous suffering and death, internal violence from post-removal factionalism, and the unification and rebuilding of the Cherokee Nation in the Indian Territory, as well as the Civil War, are covered in the documents of the archives. We are fortunate that the Cherokee records found here and in other repositories and libraries across the country are so extensive that researchers will be kept busy for decades, if not centuries, making new discoveries and producing new findings to enhance the public understanding of this fascinating saga of American history. This symposium and exhibition and publication that follow are made possible in part through the generous support of the Cherokee Nation. Our first speaker is Dr. Julie Reed. Dr. Reed is an assistant professor of history at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville and is a faculty co-sponsor of the Native American Student Association. She was the 2013-14 David J. Weber Fellow for the Study of Southwestern America at SMU's Clements Center in Dallas. She authored the article, Family and Nation, Cherokee Orphan Care, 1835 to 1903, published by the American Indian Quarterly. Her forthcoming book, Serving the Nation, Cherokee Sovereignty and Social Welfare, 1800 to 1907, will be released from the University of Oklahoma Press in May 2016. Dr. Reed is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Her family resides in the Sycamore community in Diane, Tahlequah, Tulsa, and Norman. Please help me welcome Dr. Julie Reed.
I didn't get height. What an honor. Let me start by saying what an honor. And to make a correction, the book actually arrived yesterday. I saw pictures of it from home sent to me, that the box of the books had arrived, and the Talbot Museum in Cohort informed me that they have their copies already too. But it's great that I'm here today to talk about this, because there are so many people in this audience that are co-authors on that book, even though their names are not on the title. And I don't often get an opportunity to thank them publicly. I want to take a minute to do that, as well as to thank Duane King and Natalie Kim for organizing this conference and for inviting me here. Again, what an honor and what a great event for us to have. That in fact, Rose Strimland, who will be speaking later, and I just kind of did an excitement dance of these documents, because we get excited about documents as historians. So what a gift. So let me say that Jeff Baker, sitting here on the front row, has just been an amazing part of my process throughout working on the book. Has been an insightful resource and directed me to documents and to people that could help fill in gaps that I need filled in. Travis Owens, was essential during my process. I was able to do some research for cultural tourism and to offer some of what I was gathering to them as they were working in the National Prison Museum, which figures as a primary character in the book. And all of the staff at Cultural Tourism were just phenomenal and have continued to be people that I look to and talk to about where I go next. And so there's also family in this audience. So my Uncle Jay is here, and Lisa Parker, who is as much family as you can be without blood. And that Uncle Jay sent me on my path. First, gave me my first copy of Angie DeVoe's And Still the Waters Run. And inscribed in that, may your search for knowledge bring you home. And today is a perfect moment when that knowledge gets to bring me home. And so I'm grateful to him for years of support that will continue years into the future. And so I just want to thank all of the people that are here today who have been a part of that process, because it is, it's a partnership to write anything of this magnitude. And so the idea that this is a single author work, when in fact so many people enriched my own thinking about this project, it is a better truth about that project. So some of what I will be discussing today is not necessarily on the book itself, but thoughts that came out of that process and things that I have been considering since then. So the title of my talk today is The Long Removal Era. And this comes from the fact that as I... Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that came out of my book was that many of the people that I was studying through these institutions, and particularly I was looking at how we got to an orphanage and a national prison and a mental health facility in the post-Civil War period. How did we go from being a matrilineal, clan-based system of care and belonging and social welfare to a national system that administered services to individual citizens? What was that path that we took? What kinds of decisions did we make? And what were the other options available? And many of the administrators of these institutions, or people that were a part of this process, were old settlers. And as somebody who's been trained and thought about the larger kind of academic histories that get written about Cherokee history, that often the story of the removal era is, of course, the Ross or National Party and the Waddy Boudinot Ridge Treaty Party. And I thought, well, but there's something else going on here, that suddenly you have these old settlers who've been kind of written out of academic histories, really being essential to this process. And so part of my looking at this longer removal era and thinking about the decisions that are made in a slightly earlier period is because it seems to me that there was part of the academic histories that didn't talk about the story. And then I think about Jack's work and think about the community conversations that happened, that knowing the old settlers are an essential part of our story here in Oklahoma, and that wasn't being reflected in the larger academic histories either. So, for the purposes of today's talk, I intend to focus on the years after 1795, when this is a moment when the Chickamauga military resistance to Anglo-Americans and to the U.S. in particular has ended. And taking us through 1830, the year the Indian Removal Act is passed. And this is what I consider to be part one of the long removal era. And this is a period that is often also associated with more closely with the U.S. government's civilization policy, which aimed to remake Cherokee people into the image of middling and elite Americans. And this policy that also overlapped with President Jefferson's 1808 statements that introduced removal as an option for Cherokee people. So 1808, even though Jefferson is not prepared to forcibly remove Cherokee people, he introduces it as an idea. And once it's an idea, it percolates, right? I mean, it's going to stay around for a bit and ultimately build up to this longer movement. And historians have dealt with these earlier moments, but they deal with them as discrete moments, that there's a crisis in 1817 and 1819 with those treaties, and that we get through that crisis. And in fact, we don't have to think about it in the same way again until 28. And I think that's wrong. So part of the reason I'm proposing to think about this longer arc of Cherokee removal history is because I think to do so matches how our ancestors and many of our elders marked time. I think because the moment Jefferson uttered the word removal, it became a political possibility. Because the treaties that followed that utterance contained concessions for voluntary removal, and because many of our ancestors exercised those options. And also because the dark cloud of removal hung over the political landscape for 2 generations before forced removal. And that storm system moved through Cherokee society much longer. As long as it was there, what might have been other ways forward for previous generations, I think, remained obscured in shadows. And in spite of that cloud, our ancestors, whether they were among the increasingly centralized leaders of the nation, or among the majority of everyday Cherokee people, including our grandmothers, our ancestors still planted seeds for us in the sunniest places they could see. And for some, this was west of the Mississippi, including, and for others it was experimentation with elements offered by the United States civilization policy, including the education offered by missionaries, or the adoption of plantation slavery by a growing elite class of Cherokee men and few Cherokee women. And the effects of that, of course, are still impacting our families, our communities, and the nation today. And for most, it was a commitment to continue growing seeds where they always had, in the ridges and valleys of the Appalachians, a place that I am blessed and enjoy living today. But it was all of our ancestors' choices that created the conditions to live and exist in spite of Anglo-American settlers and speculators and the elected officials and bureaucrats in bed with and beholden to them, who worked diligently toward a very different outcome. Now, geographically, my focus is going to be on the Lower Town region. This is a region that the Chickamaugas moved into during the American Revolution in order to continue staging a military resistance against the United States. And so many of these communities are older Creek towns, and Cherokees moved into this region because in many instances they relied on those creeks, and so new towns kind of percolated in that area. And this in itself is an interesting strategy on the part of Cherokee people, that these were people who made the decision to internally displace themselves before removal. Now they stayed within the community, they stayed within the nation, but they made a decision to displace themselves to a different location collectively within the nation. So this is also indicative of the fact that many of our forebears made decisions related to geopolitics that shaped internal removal debates and the disagreements and the reconciliations that followed forced removal. Now, U.S. officials, in part because of the military resistance that these communities had waged, directed a sizable portion of the economic energy at the lower towns in the first years of the U.S. civilization policy. So during the War of 1812, the lower towns were on the front lines, both physically and militarily. So they were serving with U.S. forces within the War of 1812, and they were also the closest to that fighting and had lots of depredations carried out within their own communities. And many of the families who chose to remove through those 1817 and 1819 treaty provisions, who we commonly refer to as either the Arkansas Cherokees or the Old Settlers, resided in the lower towns. Now, all of these circumstances created a range of documents through which historians can think about many of these issues. But why focus on the Old Settlers? So, as I already said, because academic historians haven't. And it doesn't make sense when we consider the fact that our ancestors did focus on the decisions and actions of Old Settlers. And the Old Settlers matter to our communities today, as I already said. It's a glaring blind spot in the scholarship. And I would argue, additionally, by focusing on the circumstances leading up to the decisions by those who would become known as the Old Settlers, it deepens and widens the scholarly community's knowledge of both who we are and who we have always been, which is a diverse and not always in agreement. We disagree, and we have over time. Now, by focusing on the Old Settler stories too, it demonstrates there were no good answers during the long removal era. Settler colonialism only offered a series of what I would argue were disabling options, which forced Cherokee people, especially Cherokee men, to simultaneously become victims and victimizers of others, especially Cherokee women. And colonization forced Cherokee people to become agents of their own colonization in the short term. So there are some negative effects that we can't get past. And in fact, this is the insidiousness of what played out, is that it didn't give a full range of options to our ancestors. The things that they might have chosen to do under these conditions might have been really different under other circumstances. And also the decisions made by those who became Old Settlers were not made in isolation. They were made side by side with our communities who chose to remain in the East. They were made side by side with people making all sorts of decisions. Now, one of the ways I have thought through, and many of the people that I'm interested, I'm not interested in the political figures. There's plenty of people doing work on those big, high political figures. I'm interested in people, everyday Cherokees, grappling with the moments that are being created around them. And one of the places that I went to for both my book, but also to think through these issues, are the War of 1812 pension applications, which, again, I'm not a military historian. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in those troops, what the troops are doing. But I am interested in what those pension applications tell us about Cherokee families. And what they tell us is that there were men with multiple wives who needed pensions for multiple wives. And that some of those multiple wives, there are two instances of women who were married to men with more than one wife who chose to remove. And in those pension applications, they're gone. They don't need the pension. They don't need access to those widows' pensions because they've already removed west. They've made a decision to remove west. Now, do I have their names? No, pension applications don't really care about women's names for the most part. They're just the widow of. Now, the other reason that I think that this region and the Old Settlers get quite interesting is because these 1817 and 1819 treaties that really made it possible for people to move west with lots of financial support from the U.S. Tells us what the options were in that moment and gives us a sense of who is going to be able to stay potentially in the East and who's not going to be able to be welcomed and remain in the East. And just to give you kind of a brief outline, I'm sorry, these are so small, but just to give you the lay of the land, there was a removal in 1806, and some of this is happening around treaties that are being signed at the period. And although there's not provisions in that 1806 treaty, there were conditions that led a small group of Cherokees to emigrate west. 1808, first recorded law. Of course, we had vast codes of law that people knew and understood, but this was the moment when a law was written down. War of 1812. And then 1816 is when the negotiations to secure those pensions for War of 1812 veterans happens. But that happens in the midst of these other 1817 treaty negotiations. So although the treaty itself doesn't contain the provisions for these pensions, these negotiations are happening simultaneous to this. And then we have the 1819 treaty which follows, which makes some adjustments to that 1817 treaty and also adds in a few additional provisions. And in 1824, the Western Cherokees of the old settlers are recording written laws as well. And then in 1825, a turning point is some major changes to Cherokee citizenship laws. And the other things are more familiar to us, but I just want to give us the lay of the land in terms of that chronology. So this 1817 treaty, just to give you some language surrounding these removal options, the United States do also bind themselves to give to all the poor warriors who may remove to the western side of the Mississippi River one rifle gun, an ammunition, one blanket, and one grouse kettle, or in lieu of the grouse kettle, a beaver trap, which is to be considered as a full compensation for the improvements which they made. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's what you get if you choose to remove. So, I mean, on first look, this suggests that these are poor warriors leaving, but this is about men. It's men who are choosing to remove west. Okay? And the way that this is often led by historians in academia is that, in fact, these are men unwilling to give up their warrior status and, in fact, want to move west to continue warring. And also that these are men who are really attached to clan vengeance. There's an unwillingness to remain in the East and be expected to give that option up. Okay? But I would also add to that clan vengeance is a part of that matrilineal system. But that's a basic feature of that older matrilineal clan law. And so this tells us something about how these men are interpreting their understandings of that older matrilineal kinship and the obligations that they have to fulfill within that system. So although this is about poor warriors, it's also about how you take care of the rest of your community and the obligations you have. And so then when you see something like this and you see that women are choosing to remove at the same time, making decisions to remove at the same time, that in fact they're going for reasons that are probably quite similar. That there are options that they believe they will have in the West that they may not have in the East. Now, the 1819 treaty gave kind of a slightly different sense of what the options were and spelled it out a little bit differently. So the first part, that a reservation, and this is also part of the 1870 treaty, but it's not spelled out in quite the same way, that a reservation in fee simple of 640 acres square, which is to be located as is hereafter provided to include their improvements, all their personal property on that land, managing their property, and all of whom are believed to be persons of industry and capable of managing their property with discretion, and have, with few exceptions, made considerable improvements on the tract reserves. What does all this mean? This means that you better be civilized if you want to stay in the East. Okay? That you better have lots of personal property. That, in fact, if you want to exercise this option to take land, and this is going to essentially be private land holdings with some caveats, then you have to meet a certain criteria. Okay? And so if you're not meeting that criteria, then in fact you are perhaps not going to be viewed in the same way if you remain in the East by whites, by settlers, by the state governments. And then the second option embedded in that treaty is that the contracting parties agree that the annuity to the Cherokee Nation shall be paid 2/3 to the Cherokees east of the Mississippi and 1/3 to the Cherokees west of that river, as it is estimated that those who have immigrated and who have enrolled for immigration, haven't left yet, but are planning potentially to leave, will get access to the funds being negotiated. Now, we know that lots of people signed up for these renewals who didn't actually leave. They stayed in the East. They remained in the East as they fully understood some of the implications of what was happening at the time. And these treaty provisions but tell us that there are options being laid out by U.S. officials relative to Cherokees' lives and futures. And we have to keep in mind, and I want us to keep in mind, that the Christianization efforts of the civilization policy are happening in tandem with all of these removal options. And that this is creating psychological and physical fissures in families and among the larger community. So there's been a lot of work done on Catherine Brown, who was an early Christian convert who attended the mission station, the ABCFM's mission station. And she's lauded as a success story. She wrote, she produced lots of documents. And I also want to think about how this removal option that's being exercised in this earlier period, coupled with the civilization policy, impacted her family. And her family did become old settlers. And there's strong evidence that Catherine's family viewed the education provided by the missionaries as both an opportunity and a refuge for their only daughter. I'm not as certain that they were clear or that they anticipated the emotional and relational costs that the success of both would have on their families. So in 1818, after all of their livestock is stolen by whites, Brown's parents informed the missionaries that are lodging and educating their daughter that they plan to move west to essentially escape what was increasingly becoming an intolerable situation for many families in this region. And in an exchange, reported by the missionaries, they suggested Brown's parents move west without her. And having just lost most of their material wealth the civilization policy encouraged, the missionaries proposed they lose access to their daughter as well. And rather than accept this option, gotta love Brown's father, he countered the missionaries should move west with them. And as for Catherine, she cried and she prayed. And her mother said to her and to the missionaries that she would rather die than leave her daughter behind. And Catherine said, in response to this, that it would be better that Catherine said it would be better with her mother dying, that would be better than living without the missionaries. As Catherine saw it, the missionaries had, quote, brought her out of the wilderness, only to have her mother and father take her, quote, back to the dark and chilling shades of the forest. So, I mean, this is a moment when, in fact, there are successes in Catherine Brown's stories. But thinking about how these families are grappling in 1818 with these decisions that they have to make about their families and the implications of everything that's happening, these are equally terrible options in many ways. Now, when historical accounts, I think, focus on these shorter periods of time in our history, it undermines our ability to see the implications of both the 7 generations to the past as well as the 7 generations to the future. And at the same time, it also often glosses over these very personal stories that we have to reckon with. And I want to take a moment, though, to talk about what those who were moved to the West offer to those who remain in the East. And one of the individuals I'm going to finish up with today is the Glass. The Glass had removed, he had been in Chickamauga, and he had lived in this lower town area, and had removed to the West in around 1818. And he called upon a number of warriors from this area to travel to the West in 1817 to assist Arkansas Cherokees in battles against the Osage. So this is another example of what the West offers. War with the Osage. Go West, fight with the Osage. And so the Glass also had been deposed in an earlier moment for making a treaty that actually gave up land. And so he removed West under duress to some extent, but he was not a favored character in the East amongst many Cherokee people. At the same time, he wrote a series of letters in 1828 from the West to the East. And the Glass, as I mentioned earlier, that embedded in these treaties about warriors and about taking guns and hunting, that in fact they are taking parts of matrilineal systems and obligations with them. And when he writes these letters back to the East, he reminds them again of these same systems. In his first letter, he tells them about the conditions they can expect. There's always war. But he also says 2 men from the Paint Clan died, warriors of Diwali. In the second letter, he mentions a retaliation for a hunting party that were killed by Pawnees when 7 men had set out to attack a village and they were discovered. And he tells them in the East, 4 men from Pinetown returned, but the following men were killed by Pawnees. One was Long Savannah Clan, who lost Duha. One was Deer Clan, Tune Nole of the family Wahachi. Wolf Clan, James, a half-breed. Okay. So he's telling us who, not necessarily the men's specific names, but who they're connected to matrilineally, the towns they live in. I mean, this is an older understanding of who Cherokee people were that is still present for the Glass. And he's reminding people in the East of these obligations. He's reminding them of who their larger kinship land networks are. And he's also, telling us about the diversity of Cherokee people at the moment. This Wolf Clan member who's a half-breed. So, his third letter in 1828, his third and final letter, which was published in 29, is the Glass's account of the internal violence among brothers and Cherokees, and he includes the following statement by a woman. Then the woman spoke, "All of you have veered away from your planned places. This man has done evil to my son." And in that same letter, the Glass wrote, "It must not be that the Cherokees, divided in two, become different. We must hear from each other." So, there's a way in which this longer removal period allows us to see the strains that families were under, that allows us to face the fact that all of us sitting here today, whether we are Cherokee Nation, whether we are Eastern Band, whether we are UKB, we're faced with impossible situations. Really, a series of complicated and no perfect decisions. And at the same time, that those who were moved to the West have lessons for those to the East. We must remain who we are as a people. And in some ways, I'm not focusing on the turmoil that follows removal. I certainly could, but that story's been told quite a bit. But the fact of the matter is, a reconciliation happens. Maybe a contentious one, but a reconciliation happens. And that in fact, we go on to build institutions. We go on to establish the first institution of higher learning for women west of the Mississippi. National public schools before the United States could even think about national schools. Care for families and communities. Even after the Civil War, the institutions that are established are for all Cherokee soldiers and their families, regardless of which side of the war that they fought on. It's a very different story than what's happening in the United States. So, this longer period, I think, is an important way of thinking through this, and I still see this even longer removal area as being one we have to follow through to allotment. That the ripple effects of all of this continue, and that even now, that many of us know our removal stories. That is part of who we are as a people, and that yes, we all share in common that forced removal story, but we share in common another removal genealogy. That if your family removed in 1818, or if your family removed in 1832, you have your own individual removal story that is a part of this longer and richer and more complex removal era. So I want to thank you all.
We have a few minutes if anybody has any questions for Julie.
Yeah,
Reed, it's my understanding that the treaties of 1870 and 19 required you to relinquish your citizenship in the Cherokee Nation if you took the reservation. How do we justify those leading Cherokees that took those reservations that are now held in fighting removals? So, how do we justify it?
Could you repeat the question?
So so as he rightly pointed out, that the treaties of 1817 and 1819 had these stipulations that essentially said, by taking these reservations, you become a citizen of the state in which you are residing. And that how then do we understand groups that resisted removal, their relationship, and kind of the arguments that they're making today, I'm assuming about. So I've had this conversation, I feel like, several times over the last few days, thinking through, I think these 1817, 1819 treaties are incredibly complex. In part because so many new ideas are being introduced during this period. So one of the things I talk about with the pension applications is this whole concept of widow and orphan, which is completely foreign to Cherokee families. You have clan members, your children are not orphans. And widows, heck, they don't need those husbands anyways. They got their clan kin, they're good. So these are new ideas that people are adapting to, and that some of the language of these treaties is being interpreted. I mean, there's great language, again, using the pensions, but I'll come back to the treaties. The pension applications of like people saying, I've adopted these children. So using adoption to claim orphans' pensions, which is an older and more intricate system that Cherokees have that people in the U.S. didn't have relative to adoption. Using language on the grand guardian. What is a grand guardian? I mean, obviously we kind of know, okay, something's happening with grandparent, something's happening with guardian, and the Cherokees are trying to make sense of these very complicated legal intricacies that are being laid out. So, there are strategies at play. The Eastern Band, those who are Eastern Band today, their strategy was to take a whole series of reserves in a block that allowed them essentially to maintain a land base. Now, it didn't work out quite like that because very quickly that land is lost. And then, in Georgia, that many of these families ultimately lost their land through land lotteries very quickly. And so, even though these lands were given out, that the federal government's kind of imposition of citizenship didn't make you a citizen of that state. The state was under no obligation to treat you equally as a citizen. And in fact, they didn't. So the other kind of complication that I think is wonderful to kind of think through is that all of these families, many of them have Cherokee mothers, they have Cherokee grandmothers, they have Cherokee clans. And your clan is obligated to receive you. Your community is obligated to receive you. So many of these people move immediately back into the nation when they're without the land itself. So they do wind up removing under other circumstances. And then there are some, and these are the really complicated people, generation after generation of intermarried white men. And this is not all of them, this is a subset. I don't want to overspeak on many families. They know exactly what they're doing. There are some families that know exactly what they're doing. And they're pretty comfortable taking citizenship, and they do okay. There's some in Tennessee, they do perfectly fine until the Civil War. And that's why I say there's this longer removal era too. That their ability to kind of live and exist in their communities changes when they're union aligned in the Civil War, and then you hit the lost cause period after the Civil War, and suddenly their communities don't like them as much. So, and their fortunes have turned. And that's not a large group of people. But there are people who were able to fully use citizenship. But if you were a monolingual Cherokee speaker, if you were a phenotypically Indian-looking person, Cherokee-looking person, it would have been much more difficult to remain in the East. It was getting increasingly difficult. And of course, racial laws are only going to heighten that. So It's complicated. I wish I could say this is perfect situation, but it's not. It's a mess.
My question for you, I guess, is a commenting question. You mentioned the glass and his letters to the East, and he was invoking the Klan membership of the individuals who had been murdered. So the implication is that he was trying to get Eastern Cherokees to come west and fight with them.
He's pulling their heartstrings for sure.
So he was expressing a cultural value that was still alive in the Western Cherokees, but was fading among the Eastern Cherokees. So my question is, did we see an uptick of removal from Eastern Cherokee populations to the West in response to these letters?
Temporarily, lots of young men went west. There's a whole series of young men who go out there, they participate. Captain Brown's brother is one of these. He goes out, he participates in these wars with the Osage Pawnees and comes back. So, I mean, the call worked. That men stepped up. It's a recruitment call to some extent. And it worked. And some remained. Some went and remained, and others came right back. They did what they needed to do. They fulfilled their obligations, and they returned to the East. Thank you. Hopefully I've talked to many of you throughout the conference.